first, though, we just want you to maybe introduce yourself and just tell us who you are, where you come from, your background, and what you're about.
Yeah, hey, so my name is AJ Sherrill, and I've sort of, I guess, I don't know where home is. I guess home is wherever my wife and daughter are, because I grew up in Tennessee, but moved pretty early to Florida. Ended up out in California and LA and Manhattan, and now I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I've been a pastor slash priest. I'm now in the sort of Anglican Church of England tradition. I've been doing that for
Nice.
like 23 years. So I write books. I really care a lot about like human personality and spiritual formation. Like, how do people grow? How do we like how do we like imagine the uniqueness of God's creation of us and sort of grow within that? I think we can sort of batch growth and spiritual formation. You can kind of give people a pretty general sort of path for growth, but we're all like uniquely made and have specificities and all sorts of particularities. So like I'm really interested in like the contours of life, the sort of path of life, the art of life. Um, and so I spend a lot of time doing that. And then like a lot of historical studies. I'm kind of a history nerd. I teach as a professor at Fuller Seminary and really enjoy ancient context. So like I think like talking about, if we were to go down the boring path of talking about the church, I think the church has more in common with the first century than it does the Protestant Reformation today. So like I think the questions being asked in the 1700s like aren't even remotely close to the questions we're asking today. And ironically, the questions people are asking today about God or reality are so much closer to first century questions I think people were wrestling with. So as we get to know the text and sort of stumble into the Roman world, we discover a lot more similarities with our own lives today. And so I'm interested in that intersection. So I like leading people to the Holy Land and walking through the Middle East, Greece, these sorts of places to reclaim and recover our faith from sort of an ancient perspective.
Why do you think it's circled back to that sort of extent time period?
I don't know. I mean, you can say a lot about history sort of quasi repeating itself. Um, I think too, just as we have gotten more of a multicultural lens through travel, through the internet, things that were not common throughout the medieval ages, I think we're beginning to see just intersections, curiosities, wonderings, a kind of access to the complexity of human life that leads us to wonder, like, how is this all part of one story? And so, like, even as like the Roman world was expanding, people were becoming aware through the road system of just different cultures. I think that has a lot to do with it. So, like, when you look at medieval Europe, for example, it's pretty monolithic. But right now, like where you look at as a 21st century, Westerner, like we are so intersected with things globally like never before. I think the early people felt more, or at least the first century felt more like that with the expansion of the Roman world. You just felt like you had more access to culture than ever. And so that might have something to do with it. Surely that's not all of it, but it's certainly not less than that.
That sounds about right, given the expansion of the internet.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
have a notion. I have a notion. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. That one reason we might be the church today might be closer to the early church than the Protestant Reformation was because there seems to be a more pagan zeitgeist now than there was during the Protestant Reformation. Where at least during the Reformation it was still based in Christian values, but now that seems like it's kind of eroding, and so people are asking harder questions that are more central to what the Gospels and the epistles are trying to present. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I think that's pretty spot on. So we've got a lot of recent development and understanding that what has like Charles Taylor is a great example. Even as early as let's say 50 to 75 years ago in America, the assumption was to believe. And so you were on the outside if you doubted. And now it seems like the assumption is to doubt. And so the temptation once again is to believe in something. So you have this sort of inverted sort of thing happening through the development of culture through time. So you can see why things ebb and flow in return based on reactions to what's come before. I think we think we're original, but so much of what we do in life is reactional to just what's happening in the moment.
Yep.
And so I would affirm that impulse. Jerry Sitzer, in his book Resilient Faith, talks a lot about that, of how we had a sort of story that for a lot of human history, at least, post, Middle Ages, you had a kind of central guiding story, and that a lot of that has been sort of ebbed away. And I would say less of paganism and more of pluralism, through which, and I think it's de Tocqueville that said, the Frenchman, about Americans, that you concentrate on this puny, tiny object, namely yourself. And so I think the
Yeah.
majority of what we're seeing today is pluralistic, because the self has become the God. It's become the replacement. It's become the authority. And what I think and feel is ultimately what, is true, and it's subjectivism, all of this stuff. So I would say, in that sense, it's like the pagan world, only we've replaced the gods in the sky with we ourselves are now gods on earth.
Yeah.
And so I think that might be the connection point there.
That's one of the hardest things to parse out is, is this truly God, or is this the version of God that I have cultivated?
No,
Well,
it was
oh, sorry.
Rowan Williams talks about how we're all just sort of kicking furniture in the dark.
Yeah.
We see through a glass darkly, is how the text would talk about it. And I think
Right.
that's why it's been important, though we can never fully grasp and get back to like this pure Jesus from the first century, who has just fascinated me, and that I sense I walk with in a spiritual way, and that I believe, I've come to believe the claims are true, where we can never get back to that pure sense of that, of understanding the pure historicity of that. I think I would put my chips in on what I read primarily in the four gospels that seem to be telling the same story. I think get us as close to an accurate picture of what an invisible God looks like. Like I truly believe in my heart that if there's a God, the God that we claim to believe in is a lot or exactly like Jesus. Like that to me brings me a lot of hope.
Yeah. Well, and you may have answered the question. What is it about Jesus that fascinates you? Or at least what are, if you can't pinpoint one, what are some of the things that stand out as salient?
I mean, this from the very get-go in the history of the Jesus people, there was this unique claim of both his true divinity and his true humanness at the same time. And I think that in of itself is hopeful. I don't think humans spend a lot of time realizing that when the creator made us, like we were designed to be divine, eternal beings. Like we weren't designed to die.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that Jesus was divine is the central claim of Genesis 2, that so were we intended to be. And then the fact that he's fully human, he like understands all of the growth edges that I struggle with, that and the brokenness and the inhumanity, if you will, the empathy, the compassion, the sense of desiring for healing and doing something about it. There's something about that that I just can't find in any other philosophy or faith tradition or even atheism. There's nothing like it that pairs the wonder of that. It was early church father Irenaeus once said that he became like man, God became like man, that man could become like God. And that was the uniqueness of what I think Jesus came to do, was to restore us to our original intent that the maker had for us. I find that very interesting and compelling.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned atheism, and in a book that you're currently working on, you quoted an author, I think Glenn Scrivener,
Mm.
and the quote is Christian. This was really cool about atheism versus Christians and the root of faith. Christians believe in the virgin birth of Jesus.
Mhm.
Atheists believe in the virgin birth of the universe. Choose your miracle.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it makes so much more sense to believe in a man who is also God.
Well, nature abhors a vacuum. So
Yeah,
you
you're going to
can,
believe in something.
you do, you have to believe in something. And if you can take the personality out of God and make God something more universal or just materialistic, then there's still a vacuum there of standards and morals. And then you get to interpose, your conveniences
Yeah,
into it,
yeah,
you know. And then it's really funny watching like Richard Dawkins and some of these other, atheists who have been like these champion chaos lords of, atheism for decades now start to roll back because they're afraid of the vacuum that they've created
Oh
by
yeah.
expelling Christianity, and now it's been kind of started to be replaced by
Yep.
another government instituted, government funded,
Yeah, Caesar.
religion. And yeah, and the chaos that it's created. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I don't think people should be Christians, but I wish we had the Christian traditions because I love the churches.
I saw that.
And I love the rituals and the holidays and the festivals. It's like, yeah, I bet you do, because like we're not gonna blow you up, buddy.
But you can't
You
have
know?
that without Christians and
Yeah.
Christianity. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry for the rabbit trail.
Sorry, AJ.
No,
Uh,
you're good. I mean, a lot of the complaints I hear from people, and I think there's some merit to it, is obviously like, I loved Jesus. It's just that, man, why do I have to put up with the church?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
get that. I get the confusion and complexity it causes, and yet I have to be really honest with myself that like, um, I'm not like a standard bearer alternative. You know, like I think it's interesting the fingers that are pointed at the church, and I get them in some ways. There's been a lot of hurt, a lot of harm. Yet, like getting people to like like get to the essence of the real question is the church is derivative. The
Yeah.
real question is like in the essence, like, what do you think about Jesus? Because what you believe about the church is irrelevant. What we believe about ultimate claims of who God is and who this God we seem to be talking about, what we think this God is like, what we imagine this God to be, those are really essential questions that, my wife has said I wanted nothing to do with the church when I started to follow Jesus. But then I realized like, oh, I I'm now like I am a part of this, whether I show up on Sunday or whatever that looks like or not, because I'm I'm his. I belong to Jesus. And so um I think just helping people get back to the essence questions of it would be a good idea for every human being to have a thoughtful reflection on who we believe um, is responsible for the beauty of this world. We should probably get some sort of clarity on that before we die.
Well, you made a very good point. I was listening to one of your sermons this morning. You mentioned something about you were retelling a story of a lady who that basically, as soon as she became Christian, as soon as she became a follower of Jesus, she kind of stopped calling herself a Christian, and she called it. She said, "I'm sick of this community." I'm horribly paraphrasing, but she said, "I'm sick of this community that is very quarrelsome in nature." And I thought, oh man, I know exactly what that's like. I mean, especially like running this channel,
Yeah.
like dude, people will just, it's
They'll be at each other's throats over the tiniest Christians, believers.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we are like, why are we so quarrelsome like that, AJ?
Yeah, and as much as I want to point fingers, like it really comes back to my own self, as if I'm an alternative
Mm.
to 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 wound inflicting, you know. So a lot of that just all the trails lead back to my own heart of
Yeah.
recognizing like I can point fingers. A lot of that is an excuse to get out of dealing with myself. And the beautiful
Oh,
thing is the kind of God we're dealing with is one that um, Jesus was drenched in love. And not like, I don't mean that as like passive, some passivity,
right,
like you do you. Like,
right,
I don't read a lot of you do you in Jesus. I
yeah.
do read a lot of like, I love you in Jesus and I'm here, like, I'm going to walk this with you
Mm.
and we're going to see something new together. I think that's compelling because I know that the very one who is revealing to me the brokenness of my heart is also the very one committed to healing that brokenness. That's a different thing that I found in any philosophy. I just feel like Jesus asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
They say that he asked about 307 questions are in the Bible and in the Gospels, and there's about 187 questions that were asked of him. That what we're talking about is a God who's like far more interested in like helping us like become self-aware and to ask good questions, and who puts questions to us that we might wrestle. And I mean, the name of Israel means struggle, to wrestle, right?
Mm.
That I
Yep.
think God, whoever your listeners are and whatever they're processing about ultimate things, like to have a kind of God that like is patient through the wrestling of life and our own sort of journey is really compelling to me. Not a God who's, submitting some sort of like, question and answer exam that we need to pass, or, be shamed or whatever.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this conversation, you like this interview, and you want to hear some more of it, including some down and dirty stuff we're not allowed to say here on YouTube, head on over to patreon.com/the Gosslings, sign up for one of our tiers, and enjoy some exclusive content.
That's right. And remember, keep it cool. And these are interviews
that strike down the darkness.
That's right, baby.
A vertical punch.